السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة
السلام ورحمة
الله
الله
وبركاته.
وبركاته.
How are you, Shaykh Jamili and Shaykh Noorud-deen?
بارك الله فيك.
Alhamdulillah,
الحمد لله very well.
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Very well, Jazakallah khair, Sayyidi.
Shaykh Jamili, you're joining us whilst you're driving. You're living the
Yes,
YouTuber lifestyle today.
yes. Driving through the streets of Mecca, just going
ما
past
شاء
Sayyidah
الله ما
Khadija,
شاء
MashaAllah.
الله
going
ما
past
شاء
Sayyidah
الله
Khadija. So nothing better than that, inshallah.
ما شاء الله الحمد
MashaAllah.
لله.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so today we are doing a Q&A on the topic of finance. So just for the viewers, if you have any questions, please do join us in studio. The link is in the description and also in the live chat. We are going to obviously prioritize the people that come in live. So if you join us, we'll bring you on and you can ask a question. Alternatively, you can leave your question in the live chat and we will get to it, inshallah, in the order that we receive them. But what we'll do is obviously if it's to do with finance, we'll put it up first. And the other questions will, inshallah, bring on at the end. So with that said, Sheikh, so if we could first start with a common kind of question that comes up, which is about mortgages, especially in the West. So if we could speak about your traditional mortgage, the conventional mortgage, and then maybe also touch upon Islamic mortgages. So could one of you start with that, inshallah?
Okay, تفضل شيخ محمد.
Okay, Sayyidi. Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So, firstly, with regards to when we're talking about mortgage, so I'm going to tackle it from two aspects. First aspect, just talking about the general concept of buying a house, etc. And secondly, looking at why its application to what we understand today. So first and foremost, there's no issues Islamically in the concept of buying a house. So you can buy a house. It's not a problem what you want to do. The most important thing we need to bear in consideration is the aspect of how we go on about things. And that's why I think this question answer session is extremely important. It's part of it, but more importantly for everyone to understand that finance is probably the biggest portion in the books of Islamic law that you will find. The chapters with regards to worship, etc., are quite I wouldn't say they're much shorter, but they're a lot more summarized. But they're not as dense as the financial perspective. And the financial perspective is extremely important because many Muslims, from my experience, are not aware that there are rules that also govern how we get on with our financial lives. Now, buying a house is a necessity, okay, or you could call it a need or even a necessity to an extent. In terms of the traditional mortgage and my understanding of how the traditional mortgage works from banks, that when you put in an application for a mortgage, you are agreeing to the bank loaning you the money, and then that money for you to pay back extra to what was loaned to you. This Islamically is called riba. Riba meaning usury. Now, this aspect of usury would not be permitted unless it was a situation whereby a person is in complete necessity, meaning that if your life, your wealth, your health, these type of things are in danger. And usually when there are alternatives, then you cannot revert to this type of haram in any way, shape or form. So this is my understanding of a traditional mortgage, whereby you are going to a bank, they are going to ask for a certain amount of money, they will lend you that money will come to you, and then that money will go, or it's reserved in the bank, and then that bank will then go to whoever you're buying the house from, and then you will have to pay that bank this much amount of money back in however installments, whatever it is, across a period of time. Then this is considered to be usury because you're taking money away and giving back the money in excess. Now, there are many solutions to get around this. However, I don't want to talk about them only because those solutions are not available. And for me to offer various solutions, there currently isn't, from my understanding, solutions out there with regards to this. So it's in terms of whether it's halal, in this situation where I say, okay, we're not allowing you to go and get this type of a mortgage to buy a house, then what about in the scenario whereby I don't have a house, I don't have any security for my family, then I would refer to what Imam al-Haramain mentions in his book Al-Ghiyathi. Imam al-Haramain is one of the greatest scholars of the Shafi'i Madhab, the Shaykh of Imam al-Ghazali, and in his book he mentions this issue about this particular thing about similar to mortgages. And it's interesting because some of the scholars that permitted having a contemporary mortgage from the from the contemporary type of scholars that not necessarily follow a particular madhab, they referred back to him in this book and on this issue. He said that you can, if someone cannot buy a house, okay, they can't access it, can they go to riba? He said that this could be possible if they cannot find anywhere else on the earth whereby they can buy it in a halal means. Okay, now it's interesting because when he mentioned this, those contemporary scholars failed to refer to this point that he mentioned. Whether it was deliberate or not, I don't know, Allahu A'lam, but he made this explicit that if he considers it as a necessity, Imam al-Haramain, but he said only when you cannot move from where you are living to another place in the world where you're allowed to move to, and you can't find a halal alternative. If you can, then you cannot buy a house via riba means. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala alam. That's in brief about through the Shafi'i madhab perspective. Fadda Sayyidi.
Barakallahu feek, Sayyidi. Essentially, it's the same in the Hanafi madhab. Riba is a problem. Riba is a concern. It's prohibited. Call it usury, call it interest. Essentially, there are many forms of it, but what we're speaking about here is when you borrow some money and you pay more than you borrowed back. And that's clearly the case with your conventional mortgage. Therefore, it is prohibited. Now, when something is prohibited, it's true that in situations of real necessity, it can become permissible. And that's the argument I've heard from a number of people that, well, fine, we agree that riba is prohibited, but in this land, unless we engage in it, we will not be able to purchase a house. Now, let me clarify from the Hanafi perspective. We agree that there is a necessity to have a roof over your head. Obviously, we do not expect you to live on the street, especially with your family. It is necessary for you to have a roof over your head. That is a necessity. However, it's not the correct presentation of the situation. It's not the case that unless you take a mortgage, you will be on the street. There is another option here, and that option is one of rental. Since rental is an option, then this argument that unless you take a mortgage, or taking a mortgage is a necessity, otherwise you won't have a house to live in or a roof over your head, is incorrect. And yes, as Sheikh Muhammad mentioned, if somebody were to say that, well, for one or another reason, I can't rent. Okay, there's some reason. Let's say, for example, this person doesn't have references and nobody will rent their house to him. Okay, and says, well, I'm going to have to purchase a house. First port of call is going to be look elsewhere. There is a huge discrepancy between house prices in various parts of the UK itself. So when we apply the principle of necessity permitting that which is prohibited, and this is a valid principle, it's often misapplied, but the principle is sound, and we have sound examples in Quran and Hadith of it. The famous one being, you are permitted to eat haram meat if you are if you are starving, you're at the point of death, you are permitted. Why? Because there's a necessity. So the principle is sound. The concern is with its application. And you can only apply it in situations where you have no other choice. So again, even if somebody were to say, oh, I can't rent for X, Y, or Z reason, and it can't be purely financial. It can't be, well, if I rent, I'll have less disposable income. And if I purchase on a riba, I will have more disposable income. That's not a valid argument. You can't engage in the haram just because you'll be financially better off. No. If somebody's making the argument, I will literally be on the street with my family unless I purchase a house. Now, And again, it needs to be investigated thoroughly. Somebody who's unable to rent, how likely is it that this person will be able to attain a mortgage in the first place? But we will also say to this person, look elsewhere. Look elsewhere in this country first and foremost. Look elsewhere abroad as well. Look at your various options. It really must be the last port of call to engage in the haram and to say it's a necessity to do so.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So just on the same kind of topic, we're speaking about conventional mortgages. What about Islamic mortgages? And there's also these kind of new schemes which are more, let's say, shared ownership and that kind of thing.
Now, let's start with Sheikh Mohammed again, please.
Yeah, Sheikh Jamili, if you could start, and then over to you, Sheikh.
So, first and foremost, I haven't looked into this deeply in terms of how they fully work, right? But from what I understand, this issue of shared, I have had a brief look at it and I've understood there's certain terminology and things that have been used that are very new terminology. In the sense that when we hear the word musharaka or shared ownership, people might get confused and think that this is something that has been mentioned in the books of fiqh. In the Shafi'i book, we don't have anything of this type of nature, okay, in Shafi'i fiqh. So, from my understanding, this is a mix and match of various madhabs and have tried, and Allah bless them because they've tried their best to try and bring a solution, okay, to the table, which perhaps is a solution that only seems to work because the banks accept it. Although I think there are a lot more solutions out there, but perhaps the banks don't want these type of solutions because of maybe profits or whatever. But I don't want to go into this. In terms of, from what I understand, is you buy a portion, and then what is happening is that the bank also buys a portion, and then you are renting their portion as well as paying back what you have, borrowed in equally. Okay. So you've essentially gone into some form of a shared ownership. Now, in the Shafi'i madhab, there's only one form of sharing, if you want to call a company, that is allowed, and that is when both parties, or as many parties as there are, all put the money into one pot and both declare, or I'm saying two here just for the sake of making it easier, both declare that we all have equal rights over all of this money, and we may spend it in whatever is beneficial to the business as much as possible, which means that I have ownership, I have freedom in his portion, and he has freedom in my portion that I've put in. Then that money may be spent to buy the house or whatever they want to do. This is the only one that's allowed in the Shafi'i school. Okay, if that doesn't happen, then there is some issues when we talk about business wise. Now, in the sense of this type of particular way, whereby I'm borrowing some money from the bank for that portion, and the same contract, I'm also renting it, this can be quite problematic. I cannot give an absolute answer of halal or haram currently because, again, I haven't had full insight into it. But all I can say from my perspective, my experience so far, is that it is quite messy. And therefore, I would say that if someone does go through this route, then they should consult, obviously, a reputable Islamic scholar within the madhab and see if that works within one of the madhabs at least, or as long as it doesn't fall into something what we call talfiq mamnu', which is, I don't want to make it too complicated for people, but basically is whenever you borrow something from another madhab, you need to ensure, or whoever's telling you this needs to ensure that that thing you're borrowing does not directly contradict something in the same thing that you're doing. Meaning, for instance, if a person has wudu and he goes and he touches his wife, okay, this in the Shafi'i madhab breaks your wudu. Okay, so now as a Shafi'i, my wudu has broken. I go to a Hanafi scholar, and a Hanafi scholar says, no, your wudu is not broken. Okay, but then I start bleeding. Okay, and blood flows, and Sheikh Noor is here, so he corrects me if I'm wrong. But my blood flows past the point, and therefore my wudu has now broken. Okay, now my wudu is broken with the Hanafi and the Shafi'i. So I can't say, okay, now I'm going to be Shafi'i because my wudu is broken with Shafi'i, and now I can't say I'm Hanafi because my wudu is broken with Hanafi. So I don't have wudu with either madhab. You see? So on that particular point, and this is what I'm afraid of, that this mixing and matching that's happened with the Islamic mortgages might have this happen, but I cannot be 100%, I can't give a 100% clear answer. So therefore I would say to anybody on this matter to make sure that they consult a reputable Islamic scholar in a madhab to check if this works in their madhab at least. Wallahu a'lam.
Yes, I would reiterate a lot of what Sheikh Muhammad has said. I have looked into Islamic mortgages as much as you can without actually embarking upon them, because you get your final contract when you actually embark upon it. The general information which is available, I've looked into, and yes, I will also reiterate what Sheikh Muhammad said, that it's good that they're trying to do something. However, if it's being presented as halal or Islamic, then they need to be sure of that. But it's good that they are attempting to provide solutions for people. There are what I would call ethical concerns as well as legal concerns. Why is it the case that the Islamic mortgage tends to be so much more expensive than the conventional mortgage? Why is that the case? That's more of an ethical issue, I suppose you could say, rather than a legal concern. But as I've mentioned on the answer on the Islam Answers website, in the answer on the Islam Answers website, that you cannot give a blanket ruling because the contract is individualized. Every person has their own contract, and there may be a variance. So as Sheikh Muhammad said, if you truly want to engage with this, to take this mortgage, then when you get your contract, before signing it, you need to check it with a credible scholar, somebody who is strong in one of the four madhabs, who can check this for you and say, well, actually, in our madhab, this is permissible. Now, I will also add that the basic concept, at least in the Hanafi madhab, the basic concept tends to be fine. Okay, the basic concept, which is, okay, you purchase a house together. They purchase the majority of it, the bank or the institution, the Islamic bank or institution. You purchase a minority of it, and then you pay rent for the share that they own, and you slowly but surely purchase more and more of their shares. There's musharaka and ijara. You have shared ownership, but you're also renting. And something which is encouraging, I was very encouraged to hear that at least one of these banks, they have you sign 2 separate contracts. And it should be a fairly obvious point that, well, the people who are doing this, they're running these mortgages, they should know their fiqh. Of course they should, but I'm sorry to say it's not always the case. Often it's just an issue of a title. Okay, this person has the title mufti, okay, or shaykh, and that's sufficient. Whether that person has deep knowledge of the subject or not, unfortunately, is often secondary. So that was encouraging, even though it's fairly basic knowledge in terms of the fiqh of finance, that when you have 2 separate transactions, each one requires a separate contract. So this institution was having people sign 1 contract for the shared purchase and ownership, and a separate contract for the rental, which again, as I've said, is encouraging that they've got that understanding and they're observing that, because in the Hanafi madhab, that's an absolute necessity. You cannot roll 2 contracts into one. However, there are certain details that have been mentioned to me that would be at the very least concerning. It requires some clarification from the bank itself, exactly how certain aspects of what they're doing work. So again, I don't want to make it too complicated, go into too much detail with regards to it. There are concerns as well as encouraging signs, but ultimately, I disagree strongly with people who, from a Hanafi perspective, with people who will just give a blanket ruling, these are all haram. Have you looked into it? No, they're all haram. Okay. They're just saying Islamic, it's not Islamic. Have you looked into it? No. What kind of scholar will do such a thing? And unfortunately, I come across this regularly. Mufti Fulan said they're all haram. Said, has he looked into them? I don't think so, but he just said, well, they just call it Islamic. It's not truly Islamic. They're just trying to get away. And the worst thing I've come across is certain people, so-called scholars and sheikhs, imams, they'll say the standard mortgage is better than this. There's no way that can be true. Okay? There's no way that people are making no attempt whatsoever are in a better situation than those who are making a serious attempt. Allahu subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So that's something that I disagree with strongly. A blanket statement that it's haram, but I also disagree with the blanket statement that it's halal. Okay, that yeah, it's Islamic, so of course it's halal. Oh, they've got scholars on the board, of course it's halal. It doesn't work like that. You have to look at the details of what's going on. Now,
Barakallah fikum. Okay, Sheikh. If we could keep the answers brief now, because quite a few to get through, inshallah. And I think I'll just give it to one of you, and then if the other has something else to add, please do join in, inshallah. Okay, so the first one, we'll go in order. I guess this is to do with finance. A brother is saying he's bought some shoes, and afterward he saw in the description that it was a Christmas themed shoe. Is there any issue with this, and does he need to return it? So if one of you can answer if this is an issue.
تفضل Shaykh Muhammad.
Naam, Sayyidi. The only thing I would say, if there's anything on the shoe that seems to have anything to do with Christmas, okay, so things such as the tree or anything that is regards to that, then yes, he should return it, because that would be, even though someone might say it's only a tree, but this is from the sha'air. This is from the I don't know the best word for this, Sidi or Noor. What would be the best word for sha'air?
Maybe signs or symbols or emblems, symbols. Maybe.
Nah, symbols. Yes. So it's one of the symbols of that practice, which is obviously a practice of kufr, of disbelief. So we do not allow that. So if it has anything like that on it, then he would have to return it. If it doesn't have anything like that, then he may keep it, and as long as it doesn't have any. No.
Just to clarify, the brother did clarify there's no Christian symbol on it. It's just the colors are, let's say, Christmassy.
Inshallah. I think the issue is only that it's because it's happened at the same time as the Christmas and the colors. But if he wears it on any other occasion, it wouldn't be that obvious. As far as I understand. If it's not that obvious, that it would be if you worn on any other occasion, there is some form of Christmas theme or attachment to it, then it shouldn't be a problem. But if there is that theme to it, such that it would be noticed even outside Christmas that this is a Christmas type of thing, then he should return it. Wallahu a'lam.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief on it. Sure. I agree with that entirely from the Hanafi perspective, and I'll add that they can't have ownership over colors, especially generic colors like red and green and such things. So even if that's their intention and they're doing it like that, fine. I might say if you've got a choice and you saw it before purchase and you had another option, fine, might be better to purchase something different. But to have this idea that these colors are specifically for Christmas and therefore the entire color becomes prohibited, we can't be that broad about things. If something is very, very specific, if it's had Christmas on it, or as Sheikh Muhammad mentioned, it's got the tree on it, or the cross or something like that, then we'd have concerns. But we can't make things that broad that just this very color belongs to this group of people. But again, yes, if in certain circumstances, certain communities, if those shoes are worn or boots are worn or trainers are worn on a particular day, it will be seen as that. Avoid it on that day.
Barakallah feekum. Okay, the next question we've kind of already answered, which is about mortgage. Following that is one on what is the ruling on trading and Bitcoin? So cryptocurrency and I guess normal stock trading. Maybe if Sheikh Nooru-ddeen, you can start this time, and then
maybe we take one each. I'll take Bitcoin, inshallah, and Sheikh Muhammad can add to that, and then also speak about trading. Okay. So Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, etc. This is very much a contemporary issue, and no doubt when you have contemporary issues, you will almost inevitably find the shuyukh differing over them. And this is what I found from the Hanafi perspective. Let me just briefly mention the methodology so people are clear. When something is discussed in the classical books, then contemporary scholars have no choice but to relay to you what's in those books. Contemporary scholars can't just say, well, I think this, when an issue is addressed in the classical books. However, when an issue is new and it's not it has not been addressed in the classical books, then yes, contemporary scholars are going to have to analyze it, understand it in light of Quran and Sunnah and the framework of the madhab and what's in the books of the madhab, and give a fatwa. But what tends to happen is they have, whenever something is a new issue, and especially a somewhat difficult issue, in my experience, almost every single time they differ over it. And this is what I found regarding Bitcoin with regards to contemporary leading Hanafis. They differ over it. Some have said it's prohibited, others they have said it's permissible. I incline towards what Sheikh Mazin, one of my teachers, Sheikh Mazin Bakir from Damascus, he said to me, he said that he doesn't see any reason to consider it prohibited. There's nothing there that prohibits it in and of itself. However, he did say that it does seem to be very volatile, and he would advise people not to engage in it. This is going back maybe 2 years roughly. He would advise against it, but advice is different to a legal ruling. And some other scholars said something similar. And again, when I've seen those scholars from the Hanafi perspective, those scholars who have said it's prohibited, their reasoning didn't really make sense and didn't have any support from what's in the books. Now, wallahu a'lam.
Naam. So just to add on that, Sayyidi, from the Shafi'i perspective, just particularly about Bitcoin, Bitcoin, again, electronic currencies, even money today, it's all electronic form of a currency. Okay, money today, the paper that you have in your hand is not a reality of, that's not what constitutes the money today. Money today is electronic. Okay. Now, in terms of Bitcoin itself, buying Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin, this can fall under the concept that we have in the Shafi'i madhab, which is considered Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. The name, I'm trying to remember the name now in the Shafi'i school. We have a particular name for it, whereby things that we normally cannot sell. So things that are, for example, najasa, filth, you cannot buy or sell it. You can do something else with it. What we call raf' al-yad. That's the word, raf' al-yad or raf' al-ikhtisas. The term is called raf' al-yad or raf' al-ikhtisas, which basically means to remove or absolve your responsibility over that item or that thing. So what a person is essentially doing when you're buying Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin, you are essentially saying, I absolve my responsibility from this Bitcoin. Okay, and then you are, and for a price, okay, and then you're taking whatever they're giving you and you're selling it and buying it and so on and so forth. Okay, so from this angle, in terms of this perspective, it's permitted. As for advice with regards to using it, I think I'm just going to reiterate what Sheikh Noor mentioned from his Sheikh Mazin, that people who do engage with these type of things need to be very careful, because people have lost lots and lots of money, and I know it's very easy for people to say and see that people made a lot of money from it as well, but at the same time, many people have lost a lot of money, so people should be very careful. As for trading is a similar thing in the sense that it's again, stock exchanges and things like this. There's some very simple concepts that have been put out there, that when you're buying shares, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but the concept of trading online and so on and so forth falls into the same category as raf' al-yad or raf' al-ikhtisas. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallah feekum. Okay, let's move on, inshallah. So the next one is, brother asks, if someone is financially struggling, is there any dua or wazifa you can recommend to be debt-free and have increase in money / wealth?
No, okay, maybe I'll start with this, inshallah. So, of course, you should make dua. You should make dua in your own words, in your own language, inshallah ta'ala. You should also, very importantly, look at du'as from Quran and Sunnah, which we'll come to in a moment. But importantly, you must also trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make the relevant efforts. Okay, and know the legal rulings and apply those legal rulings, especially when you owe people money. When you owe people money, you are not permitted to engage in luxuries. You have to, cut back, and you have to earn as much as you reasonably can and pay those people back. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I would say, sometimes even abuse of these rulings. You'll have absurd situations like when somebody doesn't go to Hajj. You say, why didn't you go to Hajj? He says, well, I need to go to Hajj, but I owe somebody money. You say, okay, khair, inshallah ta'ala. Next thing you know, this person's off on holiday. So well, if you can't go to Hajj, well, how are you permitted to go on holiday? Yani, pay your debt. Now, so there is also the aspect of taking the means. Of course, you should make dua, you should supplicate, you should do such things, but you should also take the means, inshallah ta'ala. Now, Surah Waqi'ah is good to recite, inshallah ta'ala, in the evening, ideally any time after Maghrib. Some scholars have a practice of reciting it after Asr, but ideally after Maghrib, inshallah ta'ala, any time after that. And if I'm not mistaken, we have a Sunnah dua as well on the Islam Answers website, which we can share with the individual, inshallah ta'ala. So has it written there and can recite it regularly.
We'll move on to the next one, inshallah. The next question is, should one study Islamic finance before enrolling an economics degree in university to avoid shubuhat and protects one's aqidah? Maybe Sheikh Jamili, you can start with this one.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what in economics, business economics, whatever, what can affect your aqidah. I'm not sure what they're particularly referring to here. Unless they were probably referring to maybe perhaps, what they're referring to here is not knowing what's halal and haram. So whether you study business or economics, or whether you go into that field or not, every single person who is buying and selling, renting, loaning, whatever you're doing, should know the rulings. That whether you're doing business and economics or not, it is haram. And I'm not sure whether I can say by the consensus, but at least by a strong, vast agreement of the scholars, for a person to embark on any action without knowing the ruling is prohibited. And some scholars would even deem those actions as invalid. So if somebody does something in the religion and somehow they got it right, but they didn't know they didn't know what got it right, but then they find out later that, oh, it was right, some of the scholars would consider that to be invalid. In finance and so on and so forth, how would that mean invalid? It would mean that that thing that you have bought and sold, you would have to return it back to that particular individual, and then once you've learned how to do it, then you'll be allowed to transact and deal. Okay, so every single person on the face of this planet who is a Muslim and is involved or will get involved in any form of buying, selling, renting, loaning, being a guarantor, being whatever it may be, must learn the rulings, because terms as me and Sheikh Nooru-ddeen might use the word term buy and sell are very loose terms. In Islam, we have many various terminologies of what's happening. And there's an example, as I mentioned before, about Bitcoin and the term that I used. Many things that we might see as buying and selling is not exactly buying and selling Islamically. So there are many things that need to be understood, and a person needs to deal with this carefully, because as you know, if somebody doesn't, as we all should be aware, that if we do not get involved in the right way and don't learn it properly and we fall into a sin, the sin can go as far as going into war with Allah and His Messenger, which is riba. Okay, usually, and I know that many people, Muslims out there, don't understand what riba is. Many may understand riba to just be, oh, I'm giving more than what I'm owed. No, there are different types of riba. If you buy something and you delay you buy a particular thing that is known and that is considered in the chapter riba, and you're delaying your payment, even if you're paying the same amount, that can also be riba. So someone has to learn the rulings very carefully. Wallahu a'lam.
Sheikh, Nooru-ddeen, if you could just, I suppose, on the back of that, just add on to this question: how severe is a riba within the deen or usury?
Yes, Bismillah. So there are many things that can be said about this, but let's first of all build on what Sheikh Muhammad said, that this is harb. Yani this is war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran, that if we do not let go, or the command is you do not let go of the usury that exists between you, then be aware and be notified of war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. The whole purpose of our life is to gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Engaging in usury puts you in the polar opposite to that. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, in a situation which is a polar opposite to that, absolute war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, that is more than sufficient. Then you have so many hadith narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and especially from a Hanafi perspective, usury as well as alcohol have the strictest rulings when it comes to even a what you might call a loose involvement. Okay, often the Hanafis will say, if you're not directly involved in sin, but you do something and then somebody else takes that, or you sell something and somebody else takes that and uses it for sin, then you're not responsible, because this was somebody else's action. With usury and with wine, no, the prohibition is even with looser involvement is prohibited. Why? Because it's explicitly mentioned in hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in the sound hadith that not only the one who is taking the riba and the one who is giving the loan on riba on a usurious basis, but also the person who's witness to it and the person who writes the contract, they are all sinful. And this is why it's been mentioned as one of the destructive sins, the mubiqat, or those sins that are destructive, and often refer to them as the kaba'ir, the major sins. Wa na'udhu billah, it's one of the major sins in Islam. Wa na'udhu billah. So there is lots and lots that can be said about it, but the verse should more than suffice that a person engaging in it is warned of war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Barakallah feek. Okay, next one. If one was to leave behind money for a family member or friend after they have passed away, would one get rewards for that, for the charity used with that money? So if they were to leave money behind for someone and then that person would use it for charity, would the person who left it behind get rewarded as well?
Maybe I can start with this, inshallah. So
yeah, bismillah.
First and foremost, it seems what's being spoken about here is inheritance. And the first thing that has to be said about inheritance, you don't have very much choice with regards to what happens with your money after you pass away. People need to be well aware of this. Muslims in many parts of the world, including our part of the world, have not studied the fiqh of inheritance, don't have an understanding of how it works. They just do whatever's done culturally, and it's completely wrong. And it's actually considered dhulm, oppression, because the rightful inheritors are not getting their haqq. Okay, so that's the first thing to say. You have very little choice with regards to who gets your wealth afterwards. Okay, but khair, inshallah ta'ala, let's say that that's not the case here. Let's say this person passed away and the money went to the genuine inheritors, and then those genuine inheritors done something good with that money, gave it to charity, etc. If you were involved in the tarbiyah of this person, in the guidance of this person, in the religious nurturing of this person, and then that person does some khair, does some good, then inshallah you will share in the reward. Now, alhamdulillah, this is one of the great blessings of teaching Islam, propagating Islam, trying to take Islam to other people, be they Muslims who are weak in their practice or be it non-Muslims, that when you guide people to goodness and assist them therein, you do share in the reward. So no doubt, if this person was involved in the tarbiyah of this individual, in the guidance of this individual, and especially if it's a son or a daughter, we would hope that they were, then inshallah there will be a share in the reward.
Shukran. Okay, the next question is for Sheikh Jamili, so we'll just bring that up. Before I do that, can everyone please subscribe, like, and share the video, inshallah. And like I said, we will probably stop taking questions soon, but you can always join us in studio and we'll give you priority, inshallah. Sheikh, someone asked specifically for yourself to answer this question, which is, how would you look at finances in the long term from the perspective that you can die at any moment?
Finances in the long term from the perspective that you can die at any moment. I'm not sure I understand what that question.
Maybe it's asking that should we be concerned with finances and trying to hoard money and save money?
I see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, look, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would, whenever he would leave enough for his family, yani he would plan to leave enough for his family for the year. Okay. Now, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we all know, if you read his shama'il, is something to look into his life, sallallahu, and understand that he's very simple. His life was very simple, and he didn't really live off much, and neither did his family. But in terms of what we've been commanded to do, is we should work enough to not leave our family dependent on anybody else, and at least the man should try and leave his family independent, especially financially, as much as they can. Now, this doesn't mean that the man should spend all of his time worrying about money, but at least enough to keep his family independent for if he passes away or whatever it is, but for as much as he can, because anything beyond what will last the family over that period of their lives, then that is considered excessive money. But regardless of that, I think from the Shafi'i school perspective, just something to bear in mind is that, and it relates to what Sheikh Noor answered in the last question, about in terms of what you can do with your money. Now, in terms of a person can only spend or can only give a third of their wealth. When they passed away, you can only give a wasiyah, what we call a will, of a third of your wealth. And that third of your wealth cannot go to anybody who's considered as an inheritor. If it does, then other things apply. After that, the rest of your money goes through and has to go through Islamic inheritance. Very important for Muslims in the world, especially in the non-Muslim world, to make sure that they get a solicitor or lawyer on board and remember and make it very clear that they want their money to go through Islamic inheritance. Because if they do not do that, as far as I understand, the government will take that money and then anything can happen, and you will be responsible for that in front of Allah, because you are responsible for that money that you have. So one needs to be ensure that these things are clarified. Other than that, in terms of an individual shouldn't spend too much time. Earning the money is extremely important for yourself and for your family, but as long as that does not take you away from what is an obligation from you in front of Allah and His Messenger, and as long as what you're earning is halal, then there's no issues from that perspective. I'm not sure if that was the question that's being asked, but that's how I understand it. Allahu A'lam.
Okay, the next question we have, one second, let's find one that's okay. So this one, there's a couple on this, so maybe you can wrap it up into one. Is about getting things on finance. So this brother asked specifically if you could buy an item which is interest free for an X amount of period, but if you don't pay, then you'll have to pay 2.25% APR, I think it is. Is this permissible in either school? So, basically whether it might be interest free for X amount of period, but I suppose if you don't pay in that period, then they're going to charge interest. Or if you don't pay anything during that period, then they'll charge interest.
Okay, I'll start, inshallah ta'ala, bismillah. So this will also tackle the issue of credit cards as well. My answer will address that as well, inshallah ta'ala. In the Hanafi madhab, obviously you cannot do something which is prohibited, but we have something that goes beyond that. You cannot agree to a contract that has conditions that are prohibited, even if you will not engage in them. Okay, so let's say here this person is completely confident that he will cover this payment well in advance of the 24 months, and there is no doubt in his mind with regards to being saved from the interest payments. He's completely confident that he will not have to pay the usury attributed here, or applicable here, sorry. Now, even then, he's not allowed to agree to this. Why? Because when you have a condition which is fasid or batil, which is prohibited in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will nullify the entire contract. Now, and this applies to credit cards as well. Okay, because even if you're completely confident, I'll take a credit card, but I will never ever pay usury, never pay interest. I'll always make sure I clear my balance, I clear my debt before interest is applied to it. Even in that situation, from the Hanafi perspective, you cannot agree to that. Why? Because you're signing a contract, or you're agreeing to a contract where there's at least one condition which is prohibited. The mere agreement to the possibility of paying usury renders it prohibited.
Naam, Sayyidi. Just on that, is in the Shafi'i school exactly the same answer, so I don't want to go into any details. Exactly the same as what Sheikh Noor said. Just one other point I just wanted to mention, yani, on top of that, the uh, the issue of not just agreeing, but yani, in the Shafi'i school, we have this concept, and it's extremely important that what we are giving here is a default ruling. Okay, so this is a default. Now, every person needs to, again, if they have an individual circumstance of what they are buying, it might be something absolutely necessary for them, and they can't find any other way except agreeing with this. Okay, then this is something else that we have to look at. But otherwise, making a condition, even if someone knows they're going to pay for it, even the Shafi'i school, similar to the Hanafi, that condition will nullify the contract.
I think Sheikh Jamili might have lost connection.
Yeah. Bismillah.
Okay, we'll continue, and then hopefully Sheikh Jamili will join us. Okay, the next question is, can a female who is on her own buy her own place due to wanting to feel safer in her own place? I think it's just asking if a female can buy a house.
Yes, no doubt. She's permitted to buy a house as long as she's able to do it in a halal manner. There's no difference here between a male and a female. Males are permitted to purchase homes in a halal manner. Females are permitted to purchase homes in a halal manner. Be that for she's purchasing it as an investment, or she's purchasing it to live in, inshallah ta'ala, it's permissible. If the question is question's alluding to something broader, can women live alone? As long as it's safe and there's no fitna attributed to it, or potential fitna, then it is permissible, inshallah ta'ala. However, again, we have an answer up on the website that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did advise us against living, males or females, living completely alone. This is ill-advised, inshallah. Or the advice is against that. No.
And just on that, Sayyidi, from the Shafi'i perspective, same thing in the sense that women can, buy and sell homes, whatever if they want to do it in whatever way that way is. But I don't want to say in terms of living alone. In my head, I remember reading something with regards to this, and that's why I think I would reserve my answer from the Shafi'i school on that perspective. I'll need to double check it, and maybe inshallah in our next, as maybe I can write an answer on it as well, inshallah. But for now, I just want to reserve it from the Shafi'i perspective on that.
Shukran, Sayyidi.
I think this might have been answered, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what's the ruling on buying a car on finance with the interest, if the percentage of interest is fixed?
Yes, as long as it's got interest within it, this is prohibited. Sometimes what they do, and I know this is a different question, but it should be addressed because it's quite prevalent nowadays. Sometimes what they will do is they'll say, look, if you purchase this outright, then this is the price for it. Whereas if you purchase it and pay us in installments, then we apply a different price to it. Okay. So some people will say, oh, look, they're just using different words and different terms to get away with the same thing, because look, if you purchased it on finance, you would end up paying more. And if you purchase it paying in installments, then you end up doing the same thing. That's not how the Sharia works. Okay. The details of a contract and the way a contract is worded and the agreement that's made can change can change something from halal to haram. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Holy Quran, that Allah has permitted bay', trade, and prohibited riba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned what the kuffar say. The kuffar said bay' and riba are the same thing. Oh, here you make money, here you make money. No, the details are important. The concepts are important. The terminology can be very important as well. Now, same with nikah. Okay, your ijab and qabul, your offer and acceptance is nikah is done in a particular way, it's invalid. You're not husband and wife. Done in a different way, it's valid. You are husband and wife. These things are very, very important, inshallah ta'ala. So yes, if somebody were to say, look, the price for this car, forget interest, there's no interest here, but the price for this car is £10,000, but that's if you pay immediately. Okay. If you're telling me you're going to pay me over 2 years, then I won't sell you this car for £10,000. I will sell you this car for £12,000. And the last thing I want to say regarding this, sorry, again, just to reiterate the answer here, the contract is one of usury interest. Okay, you purchase for this much and there's a fixed amount of interest. That's prohibited. Can't do it like that. You could do it in another way. And it's what, is touched upon earlier with regards to Islamic mortgages as well. It's good to see people making an effort and trying to provide solutions for people in a manner which is halal. It's what Shaykh Mazen used to regularly say to us when I was studying with him in Damascus. He says, almost every contract, or essentially every contract that you have that's prohibited, you have a permissible form of it. So when you're teaching the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course you should point out what's prohibited, but then you should also inform people that there is a permissible form of it, inshallah ta'ala, and direct them to that. Now, so yes, this done in this manner, this is prohibited. And last thing I will say, I will strongly encourage people to study the fiqh of trade. So many people speak about financial transactions without ever having studied it. And that's a terrible thing to do, and they will make grave errors and they will speak incorrectly regarding the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Shukran. Okay, the next question is drop shipping permissible? If either of you are aware of that, please do answer.
I'm not thoroughly aware of it. Sheikh Muhammad?
Yeah, no, I think as a concept, I need to double check, but therefore I'll probably withhold from an answer. But yeah, let's just withhold it from now, inshallah.
I think I have some understanding of it, and if it's not correct, then obviously whoever the question is, they can write in the chat. But my understanding is that you don't actually own the product. You advertise it somewhere else, and then that person buys from you, and then you go to the supplier and put in the address of the person that's bought it, and then they send it directly to that person.
Yeah, I have been asked about drop shipping on a number of occasions, and on every occasion, some kind of explanation has been provided to me. And as you've described, the issue always tends to come back to the same principle in fiqh, or from the Hanafi perspective, that you're selling something that you don't own. Okay, and the general rule is you can't sell something that you don't own. Now, I'm not going to speak about drop shipping directly, because not only may my understanding be, or is it shopping? Drop shopping? I thought it was okay. I thought it was drop shipping.
I think it is drop shipping. Maybe they've misspelled it.
Typo, maybe. Okay. So, and things change over time as well. At a certain point, there's the definition of something or the practice of something is a particular way, and then it changes. This is why, once again, it's so important to study the fiqh of trade. So you have the knowledge, and then you can apply it to the circumstances. But here, let's assume that you're selling something that you personally don't own. A company owns it, but you're selling it on their behalf. In and of itself, this is prohibited. But then, if you're a wakil, if you become an agent of theirs, and there's nothing too official that needs to happen there, it's not you need to sign particular paperwork. If you become a wakil of the owners of the product, then it's permissible, inshallah ta'ala. So there are ways of rendering it permissible, but you need to study, you need to be aware of how it works. So in and of itself, yes, you cannot sell something that you do not own. Okay. Well, but what if you're a wakil for the person who owns it? Oh, then you can sell it. Okay. Well, what if you're not actually selling it? Okay. What you're doing is you're essentially taking an order. Okay. Such and such wants this, and then you're going to convey that to somebody else, and the deal will be done afterwards. Okay. That may be permissible as well. Okay. What if it's being done in this manner? There are solutions to these things, but you need to study and understand them, and then try to apply them and see if the businesses, the companies involved will allow you to.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, next question. Sorry, I'm just running through them because we've got quite a few, and I know we're running out of time. So briefly, I suppose, because this could be a long topic, I assume they're asking, are student loans permissible?
Yeah, let's give this to Sheikh Muhammad, please.
Yeah, again, a long topic, but try and make it as simple as possible. If the student loan means you take money that comes directly to you, and you'll have to give even a penny more back, then it's haram to take that money. If it does not mean that, and inflation is something else. If it's inflation, that's a completely different issue. Okay, but if they're asking you have to pay you've taken £50,000. That's your loan, and therefore you will have to pay after however long years £55,000. It's prohibited to take that money. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, the next one is At what age is it no longer obligatory to support your children financially? Shaykh Noorud-deen, maybe you can start, and then if it's different in the Shafi'i madhab, then
Bismillah. So in the Hanafi books, they say for the male child, once the male child is old enough to work, then the father is within his rights to send him to work, ask him to work, and support himself. That's with the male child. With the female child, no, we don't insist on females working. So no, he can't do that with a female, even if jobs are available, even if she's old enough, she's skilled enough, he can't do that. So while she's under the care of the father, he has to provide for her irrespective of her age. Once she marries, then the financial responsibility passes to the husband.
No, same in the Shafi'i school. I think the only thing to add is obviously if the boy has any other underlying issues that stop him from working, then that's the responsibility still remains on the father to provide. So if he can't work because of some mental or physical issues, then he still has to provide. Wallahu alam. And then if he cannot provide, someone might say, but the father can't provide, then it goes to the responsibility above that, and then to the leader of state. Wallahu alam.
Shukran. Okay, next one. Just trying to whiz through these. Is it permissible to give to charity if you have a debt to a person or a mortgage to clear?
No, you shouldn't be giving charity if you owe people money. That's your obligation. Charity is voluntary upon you because there's no obligatory charity upon you. So no, your obligation is to pay off your debt. And your obligation was to not take a mortgage in the first place, a standard conventional mortgage. And then, yes, if you have taken it, make tawbah, clear it right away. Now,
I think the only thing I'll add, Sayyidi, to the mortgage issue, same answer to in terms of owing the money, etc. So not to pay to zadaqah. But in terms of mortgage, the reality is if someone has taken a mortgage via the haram means, then the reality is that person, that contract is invalid, so you should be getting your money back. If you can get your money back from the bank, then so be it. Then you need to do that and give the house back to them as soon as possible. If you can't do that, even if it's been 10 years you've been in the house, you still have to do it. If you can't do that and the bank will take your money off you, which I think is the case in that situation, then in that situation, this is called the mas'alat al-dhafar, whereby you have to protect your wealth as well, and then obviously you have to stay within what you're doing until it clears off, and obviously make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay, moving on quickly. I understand that parents have financial rights. Can you briefly cover examples of instances where a parent requests financial assistance and the son-daughter has to obey?
Yes, I'll be very brief on it. If the parents are in need, meaning they're struggling with their basic needs, they can't feed themselves, they don't have a roof over their heads, they can't clothe themselves, they can't pay the bills, etc. It's not just the absolute basic needs, it goes beyond that. If they're struggling with the basics to a degree which is appropriate to them, then it's obligatory on the parent. It's obligatory on the children, especially the male children, to provide for them and to support them, as long as they can afford it. If they can't afford it, then it gets quite complicated, quite detailed. But if there's no other choice, then in the Hanafi madhab, they said they essentially make their parents part of their household. And what they'd spend on their household, they spend a portion of that on their parents. But there are other options too. But that's when it becomes obligatory. If they need money for their, the basics of life, it's obligatory to support them.
I guess this one's also quite long, so maybe you could briefly answer it. What financial rights does the wife hold over the husband?
Let's have Sheikh Muhammad answer this.
Sheikh Jamili,
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of things. So therefore, I do advise the people to make sure they learn these type of things. But the basic rights is that the man has to provide for the wife in terms of living, accommodation, in terms of winter, summer, clothing, obviously feeding, and those are the basic type of things that we can talk about, yani the essentials, if you want to say. In terms of medical treatment, that is not an obligation on the husband to pay for. Maybe someone will be surprised at this, but in the Shafi'i school, medical treatment is not an obligation on the husband to provide for. But as well as that, if the woman is breastfeeding, then it's an obligation for the man to pay. for her breastfeeding. If as mothers, they don't see it as a duty, but the man is also, if she requires some money for this, then he is also obliged to pay. She's not forced to breastfeed. She can find someone else and he pays, and so on and so forth. If she needs a maid because that's what is the norm for her, etc., he has to also provide for that. So these are essential. But then I advise people to make sure they go and learn the religion, because there's a lot more they need to learn about these type of things. Allahu a'lam.
Barakallah fiqh. How are you guys for time? Do you need to wrap up? Because there's a
No.
How many more questions are there?
Well, depends. On topic, there's about 2 more, maybe 3. Off topic, there's probably another, maybe 3, 4 as well.
Let's try it, inshallah. So each question now, just one of us will answer it, inshallah ta'ala.
Okay,
and we'll be as brief as possible. We'll certainly cover the ones on topic, then let's see where we are.
Okay, khair. Just reminding everyone that we probably will stop. Well, we will stop taking questions now. Inshallah. If you have more questions, as you can see at the bottom, you can go to www.islamanswers.co.uk, where you can join our Q&A group as well. And there's a lot of answers already on that website, so please do check it out, inshallah. And if someone really wants a question answered, then I highly advise they jump onto the link given. So join us in studio, and we'll take you as a priority. So the next question, inshallah, is after hearing some of the answers within this live Q&A, I'm very fearful that I've involved myself with haram, i.e. mortgage, debt, usury. Can I transfer my mortgage or debt to my husband to free myself of this?
No. Let's give this to Sheikh Muhammad, because he just spoke about something related to this.
No. So again, firstly, that to be aware of these type of things, alhamdulillah, this is how our responses should be. And this is the first step of Allah's love for that slave. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us all in the love of Allah. In that situation, giving it to someone else doesn't necessarily free it, but whatever way you can rid yourself from it as soon as possible, then you can. If you can give it back to the bank and free yourself from this mortgage, and they give you all your money that you invested at the beginning, they give it back to you, then that's what you must do. But if they will take any money that you put in off you, then continue with what you're doing, and just remember to make tawbah and try and free yourself from this as soon as possible. And the Muslims should try and help each other, but just giving it to someone else doesn't necessarily free you. Allahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, Sheikh Nooru-ddeen, you can take this one. Is leasing a car permissible?
In and of itself, it's permissible, just renting this car. However, you have to look at the details of the contract, and you have to know which stipulations or conditions are halal and which are not. My advice would be take the standard lease contract, or the contract you've been given to sign, check it with a scholar, and see if there's anything in there that's prohibited. In and of itself, it's permissible, but especially nowadays in business and such and commerce, they often have lots and lots of conditions and criteria. And I've heard of some concerning issues when it comes to leasing, so it should just be double checked.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, final question on topic is, I guess this is an extension of what was asked earlier. Do brothers need to provide for sisters if the father is not available?
Okay, I'll take this because I just spoke about it, something related to this earlier. Yes, if the father is not available, he's passed away, or he's really poor, she's not married, it's not upon the husband, she doesn't have children who are old enough to work to provide for her, then it is going to pass over to brothers. The way it works is the closest relative is responsible, and then it goes out from there.
Okay, that's all of them on topic. There's a couple more that are not, they're off topic. Are we okay to take them?
Let's try, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Okay, the first one is, what advice would you give to one struggling to find a suitable spouse, and what attitude should they have in this struggle, as one should be content with what God has decreed for them?
Sheikh Muhammad, please.
No, shall I take that, Sayyidi? No. There are du'as that have been mentioned, you get from with looking for a spouse, etc. Some of the scholars have also mentioned some form of things you can say, and some scholars also mentioned Rabbi la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin, as mentioned from the Quran. Rabbi la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin. In terms of one should make dua and be patient. You know, patience is, I know it's easy to say, but patience is an act that requires some time. Sayyidina Yusuf was in prison for a long time. Sayyidina Yaqub had to wait for a long time. So perhaps reciting Surah Yusuf to remind yourself of patience and the story of patience, and to understand that there is good after the end of it. And you know, the only thing I would mention to the person who's asking is not necessarily getting married quickly is going to be good. People go through a lot of rough patches, and perhaps this is, you know, this waiting time, whatever you're looking, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hopefully, and you do, if you practice patience, Allah will show you the right way and find you the right spouse, bi'idhnillah. But do not rush into things. Make sure your spouse that you look for, you have a very clear understanding of what you want. Many people fall in, again, I don't want to go into much marriage about this because I don't want to make a marriage discussion, but many people fall into this thing of, okay, you know, the person may get better and later on. This is not a very good way of going on about things, okay? So my simple thing is to be patient and try and busy yourself with things that are beneficial to you now. Wallahu a'lam.
Also, I'd just like to add that I think Sheikh Nooru-ddeen did do a podcast with Salam seekers on the issue of seeking a spouse. So do check that out. We'll put a link to that soon, inshallah. The final question that was off topic we'll take. I can see in the chat that someone's asked about credit cards. We have addressed that previously, so try to go back a bit and you'll hear an answer on that. And the final one was, can you pray behind someone of another madhab where their prayer would be valid in their madhab but invalid in yours?
Yeah. Just final thing on the marriage, Islam Answers does have a service for this, so feel free to check it out, and inshallah we'll be able to help you find a suitable spouse. So yes, you can, of course, generally you can pray behind people of other madhahib, and you should pray behind people of other madhahib. It's wrong to insist I'm going to pray behind an imam of my madhab alone. However, yes, if they're praying a prayer that's invalid in your madhab, for example, a Hanafi praying behind a Shafi'i who prays witr as 2 rakat salam, 1 rakat salam, that will be invalid in the Hanafi madhab. And yes, from the Hanafi perspective, the best thing to do would be either pray alone or pray in a different jama'ah elsewhere where they're not doing that, or maybe speak to the Shafi'i imam and say, look, could you please pray 3 rakats with 1 salam, because to my knowledge they have that option as well. Or pray behind the imam and then repeat your prayer afterwards. So you have a number of options, inshallah ta'ala. Or fine, you could take the rukhsa. You say, okay, fine, even though this is not valid in the Hanafi madhab, it's valid in the Shafi'i madhab. But then you will have that issue of making sure your prayer is valid in the Shafi'i madhab. You need some knowledge of how a prayer is validated according to the Shafi'i madhab.
Sheikh Jamili, if you could answer that, because I think the brother's example was, can a Shafi'i pray behind a Hanafi who touched his wife before praying?
Yes, yeah. So in the Shafi'i school, firstly, the reliable position of the madhab is that if something is invalid in your school and the person commits it, okay, even if they're a Hanafi and they touch their wife and then they pray, then your wudu is also invalid. Sorry, not your wudu. You can't pray behind that person. Okay. However, if Allah, there is another opinion in our madhab that is not a strong opinion, but it's a valid opinion to follow. That that as long as it's valid in their school, then if their prayer is valid in their school, then it's okay to pray behind that imam. And this is generally, even though it's not the reliable position of the madhab, this is generally what I've found the scholars acting upon the most, and even within the thingy, because they try and hold the people together, and it seems to be a more practical way of doing things. So a Shafi'i can pray behind the Hanafi can pray behind the Shafi'i, and so on and so forth with the Shafi'i madhab. So long as their prayer is valid in their madhab, it's fine. In that opinion, anyway.
Barakallah feekum. I think that's all the questions we're going to take. If we've missed anyone's question, like I said, you can go into www.islamanswers.co.uk. We have a lot of answers there already. You can also join the Q&A group from there. Also, we're going to have our next Q&A next month, inshallah, so you can join us there. But before we go, I know Islam Answers got a upcoming Umrah trip. So Sheikh Nooru-ddeen, maybe you can give us an update on that, and also advice to people who have registered.
Yes, Bismillah. So an update is we have 3 days left for registration. After 3 days, registration will close. On the 20th, registration will close, inshallah ta'ala. So if you're interested or you know of other people who are interested, please sign up immediately. Otherwise, you will miss out. Advice to those who have registered, Allah Most High bless them and grant us all tawfiq, inshallah ta'ala. First and foremost, make great intentions and have great hopes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make the intention that you're doing this to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're doing this to transform yourself religiously, spiritually, and have great hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this will be an incredibly transformative experience. It was an experience that will draw you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that you've not experienced before. Have just an abundance of hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's number one. Make a lot of intentions, inshallah. Number two, have great hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number three, and I'll leave it here for now. Number three is we will obviously have classes, fiqh classes, inshallah ta'ala, regarding Umrah and how to carry out and the details of that. But also we will have a class on the spiritual aspects of it, inshallah ta'ala. So do make sure you attend those, inshallah, and benefit from those, and you go to Umrah together with the group fully prepared.
Shaykh Jamili, if you could just give a quick advice to those that are preparing to go Umrah, if you're still with us, and then we can wrap up, inshallah. I'm not sure if Shaykh heard me.
Repeat your question, please, Sayyidi.
Shaykh Jamili, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you, Sayyidi.
Okay, no, I was just saying if you could quickly give some advice to those that are preparing to go Umrah, inshallah, and then we can wrap up, inshallah.
No. My only thing is that people make lofty intentions, and remember that where they are going is Al-Haram al-Makki, a place that is very sacred to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With the lofty intention that you make, and this journey, every step you make towards it will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it will be something that you will carry to the next world and the hereafter, and to make some good bonds with people, and to make it a means of that this is a new chapter in your lives. Okay, it's a new chapter in your lives, a new chapter to learn something, a new chapter to also change something within yourselves, and be open with your hearts when you go to the Haram al-Makki, go to the Haram al-Madani. Be open with your hearts. Be ready to, embrace the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in those places, because there are many spiritual factors that maybe things we cannot see but exist over there in both places, that Mecca and Medina. And truly those things are, that if people were to see what actually happens in those places and the reality of the blessings there, then, kings and armies will be fighting over that place. But they don't, and Allah has protected it. It's sufficient to say that Dajjal cannot enter those two places. But alhamdulillah, as Muslims and believers, we can enter those two places. And we can be in those. And Dajjal is a good example of the modern ways of things, and how the modern ways of things will destroy people. But as long as we have Iman, then that is because that's our real home. And this is what the scholars, they say, don't look at yourself as just being a visitor. Know that this is the home of Iman, the home of belief, the home of where Islam began. So this is where you truly belong. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feekum. Okay, we'll wrap up there, inshallah. Join us next time. Till then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.